Were you surprised when you read or heard about this report today, Petronella?
Oh, not in the least. It was much kinder than I expected.
Really?
Yes.
How many? Tell me more.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the American Songbook, but there's a rather amusing composition by Alan J. Lerner called "How Could You Believe Me When How Could You Believe Me When I Said I Loved You When You Knew I'd Been a Liar All My Life," and on it goes.
Yeah.
You have to remember that Boris was sacked from his first job on the Times for lying, and he hasn't just lied to Parliament, he's lied to everybody. He's lied to everyone who's employed him.
Lied to you?
Well, he's lied to all his friends. He probably lied less to me than anybody, actually. But he is the architect of his own downfall. But the interesting thing about him is that he has persecution mania. And people with persecution mania think that it's all a conspiracy and everybody's out to get them. Whereas that isn't the case. The fact is, with Boris, he arouses eventually such uncontrollable irritation that you just want him to sort of go away. He brings everything on himself. He's not this victim. He's now pretending that he's sort of Christ in Parliament or the Pharisees or the Sanhedrin. This just isn't the case.
But he really thinks that he's a victim. He genuinely believes that they've always been out to get him, and it's unfair. People with persecution
mania think they are a victim. Absolutely.
Now, when you were first getting to know him at The Spectator, what was the attraction? There must have been something there. Is he charismatic?
Well, I disliked him intensely for a long time.
Really?
What you noticed about him was there was a physicality. He's quite a big man, quite a muscular man, although he's not terribly fit. But he sort of fills a room. The other thing that was mildly appealing is that there are very few old Etonians or public school educated Englishmen in journalism who you can have an intelligent conversation with. I won't take that away from him because he's very, very knowledgeable about the classics, something I was interested in. We used to sort of write ancient Greek. Yes, you could have a conversation with him and he could be quite funny. But once you'd heard the joke for the 10th time, it was no longer quite as amusing.
Faltered. Now, lots of his relationships have gone south, and now it seems that his relationship with the Conservative Party has gone south. Do you think he cares about the Conservative Party, really? I mean, he's a leading Tory in the country, and lots of people assume he does.
But he's not a Tory at all. He's never had a Tory idea in his head. I remember discussing Disraeli with him once. He didn't even know anything about Disraeli's most famous speeches. He knew practically nothing about Robert Peel. He's not a Tory. He's somebody who used the Tory party, but his views, and this is interesting, he attacks what he calls the Westminster elite, but he is so Westminster elite at heart. He's wealthy,
socially liberal,
exactly. Believes in animal rights, carbon net zero. He is not some Lee Anderson.
Absolutely not. And when it comes to Brexit, he famously wrote the two essays, one pro and one anti.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think he was horrified when Brexit actually won.
So would you go as far to say that he was never a true Brexiteer?
Probably, yes. I would. I think it was largely a career move.
So when you looked at the honours list, again, that's proved or provoked an awful lot of outrage around the country, some of this. Were you surprised at all by that?
No. Once again, I thought it might be even more horrific. I think he does these things to annoy.
Well, highly successful in this circumstance.
Highly successfully, but I think we shouldn't take him so seriously because we're doing him too much of a favour here. I think he's finished as an MP. I think he's saying he's going to come back because he needs to keep his market value up, especially when it comes to the speech-making circuit in America, whatever. But I don't believe he's going to come back. to Parliament as an MP. I don't believe it.
I'm sure that you're right, actually, given where he is at the moment. You know your royals. Let me ask you something that Keir Starmer said about him yesterday and about that honours list. He said, because of what he's done, he's trying to put into the House of Lords people who were partying when the Queen was sitting alone at her husband's funeral.
He's right.
And that gives the new king an incredibly difficult choice.
He's absolutely right. I mean, for me, luckily I didn't have a relative who died during the lockdowns. I have friends who do, and it was horrendous for them not being able to say goodbye, not being with them in the hospital. And people do take that seriously. You can't laugh it off and say it's a fuss about nothing. He was the Prime Minister. He made these pieces of legislation. He was the architect of them.
Yeah.
And then he ignores them. But the thing about the Queen, I think that shocked the nation, that picture of this frail old lady sitting on her own. But you were making a further point about...
Well, I was going to say, you're a friend of Camilla, the current Queen. Do you think it shocked the current royal family as well? Do you think they feel that pain?
It would have done, because Camilla's a very decent, straight person, very honest. And Charles, and he has some faults, but he always behaves very, very well. And he would have been shocked. He would have been shocked. And I don't think he and Boris are exactly soulmates anyway.
No, but he would not have liked the idea of having to ennoble people who had been partying at that particular time.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, Boris is trying to irritate everybody. I mean, nobody can understand half of it, and the idea of putting up your own father for a night and then, I mean, I don't think they should have allowed through the Charlotte Owen peerage. I think it makes a mockery of the Lords.
So we should explain. She was a young number 10
She was a
staffer.
She was a 29-year-old staffer who had a very, very short political career working for Boris and didn't do very much. She never had a senior role or role of any importance. I always used to believe that a peerage was a reward for a lifetime of distinguished service. My father got a peerage, but not until he was nearly 70.
And he'd been a Labour MP, he'd been involved in the Tote, he'd done all sorts of things.
Exactly, and he did a lot of charity work as well. I mean, I do know that members of the Lords are furious about some of these appointments. And it also makes a mockery of the Lords. And I do now think that we should have an elected second chamber.
Oh, you've come over to my dark side, Petronella.
I'm afraid
I didn't expect that, I have to say. Thank you very, very much for coming in and talking to me.